this meeting started.
The time is 4:30 p.m. Commissioners present are President Mary Wardell Garaducci, Commissioners Lee, Wolf, Mall, Dunning, Wong, and Ono.
Thank you, Sue. Ms. Blackman. We'd like to welcome all of you to this meeting of the San Francisco Public Library Commission. It's Thursday, November 21st, 2019. There's materials, including the agenda for this evening, along with the supportive documents. We have 7 items on our agenda today, and we will begin with item number 1, which is general public comment.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Speaking as an anonymous citizen, of course. I usually begin my comment with stop the hate, stop the ignorance, don't give money to Friends of the Library, don't accept money from Friends of the Library. I don't use that when I'm introducing an in memoriam, which is my purpose today. I want to begin, at the risk of being irreverent, with a trivia question. I wonder whether the Commissioners will recognize the question, much less the answer. How many library commissioners are in the constellation? I will pause discreetly in case anybody actually knows. The constellation is a work of art by an artist named Nayland Blake that occupies the staircase from the 2nd floor to the 5th floor, and the conceit is that it's a backlit names that are literary stars in San Francisco's constellation. The answer to the question is Ernest J. Gaines, who's commissioner from April of 1974 to July of 1975. Although he was only on the commissioner for a year and 3 months, he went on to serve on the California Library Services Board for 10 years. By coincidence, his last meeting was Nancy Pelosi's first meeting. Just a coincidence. He was professor of San Francisco State College for nearly 20 years, and he lived on Fillmore Street. He divided his time between San Francisco and Louisiana, where he eventually moved full-time. He received the National Humanities Award from President Clinton. He received the National Medal of Arts from President Obama. He was a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship winner. He won the Guggenheim, the Dos Passos Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and was named Chevalier of des Ordres de l'Art et de Lettres by the France. What did he write, you're probably asking? He wrote Of Love and Dust, In My Father's House, A Gathering of Old Men, A Lesson Before Dying. You may not have heard of those, but almost everybody knows because he was made famous by it. He wrote the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, which pretty much made him famous. He was, it was an electrifying media event. I bumped into him once at a flea market after he left the commission, and he told me how much he admired my newsletter. Not exactly my proudest moment, but not something I'm likely to forget either. Of course, it's important. What you neglect is that destroying your own history impoverishes yourselves. You would not know this if you didn't have a rich institutional memory, which comes from the involvement of public citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Good afternoon. Excuse me, Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. Institutional memory is certainly important, and the previous speaker came for some 38 years to the Library Commission without fail. I believe he missed 4 meetings in 38 years. Last month, we spoke to you about the sudden and basically secret decision to discontinue printed notices to the public. Printed notices that have to do with the public having a book that's overdue, having a book that has arrived for them that they reserved from another location within the library system or from other library systems that they have requested. And the only reason I know about it, because it was never discussed at this commission, nor certainly not approved, the only reason I know about it, aside from having heard from others, is that I myself got a note saying, this is your last mailed notice that you're going to get from the library. Pretty much everybody can have an address. Not everybody has email, which is the library's alternative. Not everybody has a telephone. To do this without any discussion about the practice or the policy at the commission, I think, is appalling. And to do it without any advance notice for the public to weigh in, I think also is appalling. This is something that affects people who may have no other way of getting notice, and who may suddenly find that they're getting the bill for a book that wasn't returned on time as the first notice that something is amiss, for example, a late book. And of course, this is another one of those things that hits the poorest people, is likely to hit the poorest people the hardest. I have not been able to determine any study or any solicitation about what patrons think or what the impact might be. I did ask, as a follow-up, I did ask the city librarian how many people have requested printed notices, and eventually the answer I got, initial answer, was 181. It looked a little funny to me, and I followed up with some comments. Turned out the actual answer was 19,000. I think this is something that needs to be studied before you take away a service, especially one that hurts poorest people the most. I wish there were something about today's agenda that talks about the changes to the computers. Again, I don't believe there was any public solicitation of public input on the changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Edward Hasbro, and one of the first things I did when I moved to San Francisco in 1985 was to get a library card. I've worked in this building writing books which are now in the collection of this library. As an author, I've spoken from this stage as well as at many other libraries. For the last 10 years, I've served as co-chair of the book division of the National Writers Union. I'm also a member of the Authors' Rights Expert Group of the International Federation of Journalists, and for the last 3 years, I've been the sole member of the board of directors of the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations, elected to represent authors of written works worldwide. So it's as a San Franciscan and a friend of libraries, but also as one of the writers, artists, illustrators, photographers, translators, and others who are the victims of so-called controlled digital lending, that I appeal to you, 1, to rescind the endorsement by the San Francisco Public Library of controlled digital lending, 2, to end the library's participation in this practice, and 3, to include the full range of opinions about CDL, including those of its critics, in future events. I've given you copies of a joint appeal endorsed by more than 40 national and international organizations of creators, publishers, and others, calling for dialogue by libraries with the victims of CDL, and a more detailed FAQ explaining how we are being harmed and the fallacies and false claims being made by proponents of CDL, and calling for dialogue with libraries about it. Last month, the San Francisco Public Library co-sponsored a pep rally and advocacy event in this auditorium, the Library Leaders Forum, to evangelize and persuade other libraries to endorse and participate in CDL. No critics of CDL were invited, and participants weren't even told that many authors have objected to CDL or have sought unsuccessfully to participate in dialogue with libraries about it. It's one thing for libraries to provide venues for the presentation of points of view that might not otherwise be heard, even if the library doesn't endorse them. But in this case, the library officially endorsed an entirely one-sided advocacy event with a single point of view on a highly controversial topic. This was wrong and deeply compromises the library's commitment to free inquiry and diversity of opinion. It's especially important for the library to provide a forum for dialogue on this issue and to hear from all stakeholders, because the Internet Archive, the originator and principal practitioner of CDL, has refused to do so. Groups representing authors have been told disingenuously that the Internet Archive prefers to deal with authors individually. But individual authors who have requested meetings with the Internet Archive about the inclusion of our work have simply been ignored. So it falls to the Library Commission, as a public body accountable to the democratic process, to ensure that all views, including those of the victims of CDL, are taken into consideration before decisions are made that affect us, and that the library fairly presents the diversity of opinions on this issue. I and others would welcome an opportunity to participate in such discussions.
Thank you.
Nick Pasquariello. I'm the chair of the Restore the Notices Committee. I share Mr. Warfield's outrage that that decision was made undemocratically, in secret, with the press blackout that came with it. It's really the most reprehensible decision that I think I've ever seen come out of this library in 50 years of using it. It is the public policy obligation of the San Francisco Public Library to serve all patrons equally and with the same level of service. It's something they brag about, but since mid-September, the library has ceased to meet that standard of high-quality universal service. The new ill-conceived so-called patron notification system, which prohibits mailed notices, now greatly favors patrons with home internet over those without home internet. If you have home internet, you get the notices. If you do not have home internet, you do not receive reliable, complete notification of library materials available for pickup at branches. A greatly dumbed-down robocall is no substitute for a complete bibliographically professional mailed paper notice, one which until September all such patrons received. The U.S. Census determined that 138,000 San Franciscans don't have home internet. Of these, until recently, the library was sending about 8,000 patrons paper notices for pickup of library materials. Surely a library system operating on an annual budget of $170 million can afford to provide the equal and complete access to its most vulnerable patrons that the law guarantees. Can it not? What is your definition of gentrification? I think we have seen it in practice, in operation here, apparently with the consent of this body. You need to review, as Mr. Warfield suggested, what this decision was made, how it was made, and how it should be fixed to serve all San Franciscans, not just the people who have the money, which too much of what goes on in this city is disgracefully going on.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Good afternoon. I'm not a big proponent of public speaking. I like to listen to other people. I'm not that comfortable doing it myself. But to me, this was a very important issue and worth my time to come down here to speak with you. My name is Karen Fishkin. I'm on the Senior and Disability Action Board and have been for many, many years. So you can guess from the name Senior and Disability Action, the people that we represent. My concerns, I'll say I support the concerns that have been presented already, and I hope you have seen, read, and taken into account the letter you should have seen from CARA, California Alliance for Retired Americans. It pretty well states it clearly. My concerns are both process and outcome. The public should be heard prior to proposed changes in service. That should be a normal part of your process. It shouldn't be behind closed doors and away from the people who use the library, especially when, as has been stated, almost 140,000 people in San Francisco don't have home access to computers. They're not online for whatever reason. They don't know how to use them. My guess is primarily they can't afford them. Can't afford the machines, can't afford the service. So what do you expect them to do? Do you have a plan for those folks to be able to comfortably utilize the libraries as they should be able to? You should want them to use library services, and I'm not convinced that you do. You used to mail notices that worked. As they say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Please go back and review and change this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? Seeing that there's none, we're going to move on to item number 2, which is a presentation from the San Francisco Unified School District and their partnership with the San Francisco Public Library. This presentation will talk about that partnership, and then the commission then will have public comment, and then thereafter the commission will have a discussion.
Thank you, President Wardell. Good evening, commissioners. Library staff appreciates this opportunity to update the commission about efforts to strengthen the library's partnership with the San Francisco Unified School District. You may recall at the August commission meeting, we were fortunate to have SFUSD's Associate Superintendent, Kevin Truitt. This evening, we're pleased to have Devin Corrigan in attendance from SFUSD. Devin is the Supervisor of Analytics and the City Liaison for Research, Planning, and Assessment. Devin will be co-presenting with members of the library staff, and it's my pleasure to introduce Christy Estrovitz, the library's Youth Services Manager, who serves as our liaison to the school district, and she'll be joined by our Chief Analytics Officer, Randy McClure. Christy?
Thank you, City Librarian. Good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to see you all again. So as Michael said, we're following up and giving you more information about our shared impact and where we can go together. And as you probably read the press release yesterday from Mayor London Breed, she announced a child and youth-friendly city initiative with a forthcoming summit and utilizing more and more resources for sustainable designed city to welcome and make families thrive. So we're excited that libraries are called out in that and schools as well. So we feel like we are well positioned to move this forward together. So here, you've probably seen this photo before. This is from our Scholar Card launch. And I love this picture because it shows shared commitment and a really special event that launched our campaign that continues to make a difference. So as Michael said, I'm joined by Devin, Supervisor of Analytics and our City Liaison from the school district. And Randy will be joining me too to talk about our internal data and what we have. So just to recap, in August, I shared a recap of our Scholar Card initiative and our reach thus far. We're in year 4. Also, the perks of a teacher card, where they have double the access to material and longer time, and more access to multiple holds on a single item, so a whole class could be in a shared reading experience. We really promoted some of the site-level collaborations that are the strongest with our teacher librarians as our key partners in every single school, and a variety of programs inside the library, outside the library, and in schools that continue to support student learning, and our annual Summer Stride book list that we co-develop with the teacher librarians and mail directly to every single household. And what we know about our data so far, we know how many children or students have activated their Scholar Card, 65% and counting. We had over 1,000 students activate their card since launching on October 1st this school year, so it's up and running. And we're really proud to say that 64% of these youth are using the library and accessing our materials, which is definitely above the national metrics. We learned this year by going a little bit deeper in our Summer Stride data that 80% of our participants were encouraged to use library resources, something we hadn't asked previously and we will continue to ask. And 69% of those participants learned something new as being part of our program. And I reported we collectively read over 19 million minutes this past summer, and that is over 11 million minutes just by the youth of San Francisco alone, so a high percentage of our Summer Stride engagement. And because working with our new data team, we've been able to go a little bit deeper with our impact, and I'm going to turn it over to Randy to share a little bit more about what we know right now.
Thank you, Christy. Hello, everyone, commissioners. As a bona fide data geek, I can say I'm really excited about what's happening here. This is wonderful. So I'm going to walk you through just actually 3 slides here of citywide maps that we've put together here in SFPL that shows some data underlying that on our biggest 2 programmatic initiatives relating to working with students here in the city. The first one that you see here is a map of summer stride activity, and each of those dots represents one of our household students. Students lives in that household, and the level of activity that's occurring in the library at that household. You kind of see just quickly, a quick view of it shows kind of the northern third of this map has a lot of activity. When you look at the kind of the North Beach, Chinatown, Marina areas, you look over a little bit to the west, the Richmond district has a lot of activity. It thins out a little bit in the middle third of the city, and then it's a little bit less so in the bottom third of the city, particularly around the southeast. Now the next slide I'm going to show you is Scholar Card. Same principle is in play here, which is each dot represents a household of the Scholar Card participant, and the bigger the dot is more usage at the library. And it's almost inverse. You see a lot of activity in Scholar Card representation there in the southern, and particularly in the southeastern quadrant of the city, a little bit less so on the Middle East, but much more on the Middle West out by the Sunset District. And then it starts to sparsen out a bit in the northern third of this map with some, obviously some activity in the Richmond, around Chinatown, the Tenderloin, and so forth. Now when we overlay those two maps together, there's a lot going on here, a lot of colors, but you can kind of see we have pretty good coverage around the city with these two initiatives and these two programs. But what it tells us is where we're really concentrated and where we maybe have some gaps and some work to do. So with that said, what we don't see here, we see activity, we see geographically how concentrated areas of the city where we're locating and reaching our students. What we don't see is how well we're doing in terms of their achievement in the school district and in the schools. That the whole point of this is to try to help lift them up with their achievement. What we see is sort of what SFPL can do. And part of that is because we have limited access to data. And we have access to where students live. We have access to their birth dates, and not much more, frankly. And one of the real positive aspects of a future partnership with the school district would be able to mine their incredibly rich data to allow us to make correlations between what we're doing on the SFPL side and the achievement that's occurring on the SFUSD side. And so with that said, I'm going to introduce Devin Corrigan from the school district, who's going to talk about some of the data that they have available on their side, and hopefully how we can ultimately try to match those two data sets as a partnership.
Good evening. I first want to say thank you for having me. I am here as an employee of the school district, yes, but also a reader and a user of the library. And I'm honored to be invited to speak to you tonight. So what I want to start with is I don't want to presume your knowledge of the district, so let's do more maps. This is a map of our whole district, and we have over 130 schools spread throughout the city. As you can see, the coverage is widespread from side to side, top to bottom, and that includes 36 sites for our littlest kids and early education programs, 64 elementary schools, 8 sites that what we call alternately configured, which means that they're elementary grades but also middle grades together. Middle schools, 13 of those, and 15 high schools. So what I see when I look at this map, especially looking at it right after the maps we just saw, is that the library and the school district are pretty uniquely suited, I think, to reach families all across our city. I love that as two city agencies who are spread so far and wide across San Francisco, we really have an opportunity to connect with families and youth where they are. And now what I want to do is introduce a bit more about our district, about who we are, who our kids are, I should say. And this is a slide that shows trend data. So it's 3 years of data. The source of this is the state Department of Education. So this is official demographic data. We are often guilty in the school district of using way too many acronyms. So I'm going to do my best not to do that. And if I do, I'm happy to explain if I miss something. So TK up there is transitional kindergarten. I'm showing you numbers for transitional kindergarten through grade 12. That's what that means at the top there. As it also says in the title, these are numbers for all of our public schools in San Francisco, but it does not include charter schools because those are independently reported. So what you see here, I know I'm just threw a lot of numbers up on the screen. So what I'll call out for you is that, the enrollment has been fairly steady at about 53,000 students over the last few years. And what I'll also call out is that you'll see there are a lot of categories, a lot of groups of students that we're presenting all at once here. And as was mentioned, I'm in the research and planning and assessment office, and really the only way we present data is by showing trends over years and by showing different subgroups of students. So you really get a more of a deeper dive into the data. And so that's what you see here. You see many different groups of students, race, ethnicity at the top, and below other groups of students, such as those receiving special education services, those who are experiencing homelessness, and other groups there. I should also mention that where it says socioeconomic status, it's a shorthand for the visual. What that really refers to is low socioeconomic status, meaning that students are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and or they also have two parents who have not completed high school, which we use as a proxy for that status. So as I said, you see that the numbers are pretty stable at about 53,000, and that the largest share is Asian students and white students, and also Hispanic Latino students. You see also that the proportions of students are pretty stable over time. And in case anybody's wondering, for pre-K, there's about 1,500 students in the pre-K programs. Now, this is my other data slide for you, and I should also mention that these slides were presented to the board a month ago. So there's many more slides, much more data that's publicly available. I'm always happy to talk to anybody about that if you have any questions. But given that we're at the library, what I wanted to present today is the data from our state test, the SBAC, specifically for ELA or English Language Arts. So what you have here again is trend data. This time we're looking at 5 years, and again, multiple different groups of students which are identified at the bottom. SES again is socioeconomic status, SPED for students who have an IEP who are receiving special education services, and EL stands for English learner. So what you see here is, again, a lot of stability. We're not seeing a whole lot of change over the 5 years that are represented on this visual. You do see a slight uptick. And what those numbers are, where it says 56 for the district, that's the most recent data we have. That's 2018-19, which is last year. Because again, this is the state test, which happens once a year. That means 56% of the students who were tested are proficient. That means they met the standard or they exceeded the standard. But what you also see when you look at this visual, the thing that jumps out to me, and I think most people who see this, is an absolutely unacceptable gap between different groups of students. You see high scores for Asian students and for white students, and you see low scores for most of the other groups. This is a visual that bothers all of us at the school district. It's something that we're working hard to fix. And I am hopeful that our partnership with the library, which has been going on for some years now, if you squint, you might actually catch me in that picture on the first slide. And I'm excited to beef up this partnership. And this is one of the reasons I'm excited about that, because our vision at the school district is to make sure that each and every student graduates prepared for the life ahead. And we need that gap to close. So this is our most recent data. As I said, I'm happy to talk more about it. This is just ELA for the state test. I should also mention that, for talking about reading, that's one of 4 constructs that's assessed in the state test. So reading is built into the scores that you see here. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Christy.
So I just want to share with you what our peer libraries are doing with data use agreements, something very similar that we've been able to do with our Scholar Card program, which is just enough data to make a library card. And this is, again, in our 4th year. So Chicago Public Library was challenged and commissioned by their mayor many years ago to make a difference during summer. So they partnered up with their local university to run and share data through that. It's aggregate data, and they've been able to tailor their summer learning program to go deeper in those neighborhoods and move that needle for student achievement. It's a award-winning program that we've definitely consulted many times, and have been a resource for our program as we continue to evolve it. Charlotte Public Library, it centers directly with their local district and their accountability office. And Cedar Rapids Public Library in Iowa are jumping for joy. They just got their data use agreement assigned just last month, and they've been 3 years in conversation around this. And that is centered around their city's campaign for grade level reading. And Solana County Library has an existing agreement, much like ours, to make library cards. And what I've done by talking to our partners, this is just a sampling. Many peer libraries are doing this, and it all centers on a shared agreement and the commitment to make a difference in the lives of students. And are allocating their resources to go into the neighborhoods and the schools and the libraries where children need it most. And they've been able to leverage this and show their shared impact. And it's mostly centered around summer learning. So when schools are closed, the libraries are really in a position, just like we're doing, to ramp up our activities and provide those STEM learning activities so kids re-enter their school year ready to learn. So we've shared a lot of data of what we know right now, what we've gathered, and we have an existing agreement. So what can we do together, knowing that we need a more dynamic and robust data agreement? So we've been talking, and we have some ideas, and we just want to kind of share those with you before we close. Everyone's excited about this.
We'll handle this one together. So one thing that I didn't mention is that I have sort of an unusual role at the school district, that I'm funded by 2 other city agencies. I work for DCYF. I also work for HSA. The idea being, when they created this position, that I think people are tired of banging on the door and trying to get attention at other places. They said, we'll just fund someone to be focused on partnership. So a lot of my work is focused on how agencies can work better together. That's why I'm here. So I am really excited about building on the work that we've done so far, which has been mostly focused on outreach. It's my job to understand the law and how we can share data responsibly, securely, carefully, to improve services for kids in the city. That's what we've done so far, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done so far. But with more robust data sharing agreements, we can answer more robust questions, and we can take the resources that we have, the limited resources that we have as city agencies, and spread them around more responsibly and target them to students who need them the most. So just to give some quick examples of what that could look like, with more data sharing, we could be talking about, well, we know these kids. This is our pool of kids who are engaged with the library. These are very frequent users or less frequent users, or kids that are not engaged with the library at all. What do we know about them? What stories can we tell about them? Where are they in school? What are their zip codes? How are they doing in school? And this is not to identify kids and share their information all over the place. As I say, we're very careful with our data. What it can do is help us identify, again, zip codes, neighborhoods, schools, where we can look into enhancing the relationships between schools and local branches. We have many successful stories to talk about already, and I think I can speak for all of us that our shared goal is to just keep that work going. So that's just a quick taste of, in the months ahead, how we want to build on the data sharing work that we've already done, to perhaps go beyond sharing of demographics for outreach and start looking at some of the relationships between use of the library and all of the success we hope to see in our schools.
And just from the library side, so exciting. If we could take what we know about library usage among Scholar Card children, among Summer Stride participants, and then correlate that to academic success, would be an incredible achievement for us, because we would then be able to say, do things matter in terms of the number of outreach points that we've given to a child to get them involved with these programs? Does it matter if they're in one versus the other or both? Those are the types of questions we could ask. And then we could also, as Devin sort of alluded to, drill down to neighborhood, drill down to school, drill down to race and ethnicity in some cases. And all of those questions are on the table that we haven't been able to answer, except sort of high level by proxy before here at the library. Anything else? Thank you.
So with that, we want to say thank you for listening, and we will sit down for public comment.
Thank you.
If I could just add very quickly as well, I just want to say Kevin Truitt wishes he could be here and says hello to everybody.
Oh, well, speaking of Mr. Truitt, we do have, some of you may know about the gold library card. There's really nothing that we could give him to say thank him for his effort and his championship, but we are going to give him a commemorative gold library card that's usually just given to SFPL retirees of a certain year. So this will be his keepsake from our public library.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We're going to open it up now for the public to comment, and then we'll have a discussion. And so if the presenters can just hang out a bit, the commissioners may have some questions for you. Public comment, please.
Good evening, Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. I have a bit of institutional memory too, although, and it has to do with Effie Lee Morris. She was a very notable librarian here. She was head of the children's department. She had many, many merits. And I considered her a friend in my early days of coming to Library Commission meetings. Effie Lee had, as a prize-winning, award-winning children's librarian, some very strong opinions about what the library should be doing with respect to kids. One of those things was she thought that children's materials should not have fines for lateness because she thought it would be very beneficial to encourage not only kids to read the children's material, but also adults, for example, who were in literacy programs or who were learning to become literate or whose English wasn't so good, but who could much more easily navigate those materials. And she didn't want that group, the people using children's materials, to have a punishment hanging over their head. She was disappointed that the library never did that. The library gave the fine-free privilege to a category of user, and that is kids under 18. So that a kid under 18 borrowing adult materials also didn't have fines, and I'm not sure about fees. So that's number one. But number two, there was something else that she was very concerned with, and that is the independent relationship of kids and others with their library. She wanted the library to have a direct relationship with the kids, not colored or tainted or any other thing you like with any outside influences. So she didn't want the library to be giving, for example, all students cards. She wanted the students to come into the library and apply for their card directly and get it directly and have a direct relationship with the library. I know as a kid I valued the library as an independent agency that wasn't connected to school, wasn't going to say anything to the school, wasn't going to influence what I do based on what the school wanted and so on. So I have very serious concerns about any program that involves another institution and the library. The page that talks about achievement says there's been steady and not an improvement for most subgroups over a 5-year period. But I'd like to speak to the independence of the library with all its users.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. I'm Cathy Cormier. I've met all of you, I think, before. I'm the program manager of the Mix at SFPL, and I wasn't actually planning to speak at all. But from my perspective, from being the program manager of the Mix, our teen space here at the main library that is very, very concerned about creating successful adults, this would just be magical for us. This is something kind of to speak what Christy was talking about before about peer libraries. This is one reason why I think our older sibling, the Chicago Public Library, UMedia Chicago, which a national network now exists that we're part of, has been so successful because they're able to better use this data to really support the students. Right now, anecdotally, I can say that we have young people who are at the mix right now who go to different schools, and so thanks to the work that Christy and her team at CPP have done, we have built relationships with the teacher librarians. But if we had access to some of this demographic data, we could do so much more, because at the mix we have created a community of trust that young people who may not always be successful at school have access to mentors and librarians and leaders who can help them build one-on-one relationships, so that these young people, you know, we keep everything that they say to us as long as they're following the rules of the library in complete confidence, to speak to Mr. Warfield's concerns, that this is a place where we can meet teens where they are. And, you know, echoing what our representative from SFUSD said, the same thing, that we are really, with this kind of data, we could just really change the narrative for a lot of young people who are coming to this building every day in hopes of having a more successful future. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I've never spoken in front of this particular board before, so I apologize if I do not know the correct protocol. But I find it very difficult to understand why you would stop paper notices to any population, seniors, low income, people that did not have access to the internet. The library is a place of communication, and I don't think that
Public comment is on this particular item?
but I think that paper notices particularly go to everybody. It's a sense of any
No,
type of notice.
This item is on San Francisco Unified School District's partnership with the San Francisco Public Library.
Are they going to be given public notices by the mail on anything?
I think that's a different, that was the earlier item.
I know, but I wasn't here. But so at least that allowed me to express that concern, and that it's a very big concern in the low-income population and in the seniors.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Further public comment? Seeing that there's none, we're going to move into our discussion. We have the members of the San Francisco Public Library here, along with the San Francisco Unified School District. They've just presented a presentation on the partnership of these two anchor institutions in the city of San Francisco. There's some data that we've been presented that is obviously hopeful, and some of it's concerning, you know, looking at some of the outcomes of some of the students, particularly by these various demographic breakdowns. But we have some geographic maps in front of us, and so I'm going to open this up to discussion for the commission. There's no action items, but we may have some comments and or questions. And so commissioners, you have the floor now to be able to ask some questions.
I'll go.
Okay, can we have Commissioner Mull?
Thank you for your presentation. I missed the, a couple things, and then I have some more questions. The EL is English learners, and the SPED is what?
Special education.
Special ed, okay. And the SES is what?
That's for students who have a low socioeconomic status.
Okay, and then what's on the other page about the low economic status?
It's the same category, just had a little more space, so I spelled it out.
Okay, so there's, just help me through this.
Of course,
Okay.
yep, I'm in no rush.
2018-19, 54.4%, you're saying, of the student body in the San Francisco Unified School District is of low economic status.
That's correct.
Okay, and then on the next page, it shows in 2019, I'm guessing only 43% have some.
So the difference is that on that previous slide, that was just it's just enrollment. So it's showing the share of total enrollment. That's the percentage of students who meet that criteria. On the next slide, it's showing something different in that we're looking at state test scores. So that percentage, that 43% that you mentioned, that's the percentage of students, of all of the students who took the test, that's the percentage of the students who were scored proficiently on that test, who are in that particular category of SES.
Just for my own sort of edification, I know what the San Francisco Public Library budget is. What's the budget of the San Francisco Unified School District?
It's about $1 billion.
Divided by, say, 52,500 kids is what? Just, does anybody?
I don't know what it is per pupil.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, well, I guess this isn't a whole discussion about the public school system, yeah. But I sort of understand, not totally understand, the relevance in terms of the data sharing. Has this not been done before?
It has been done before. We've actually had a partnership that's been going on for a couple of years now between the school district and the public library, which I alluded to, and I'm happy to speak more to what exactly the form that takes. We also do plenty of data sharing around the city with other city agencies, but only insofar as it's appropriate to do so under the federal law which governs student data, which is quite strict.
Okay, so what I was hoping to hear, actually, and I had requested this item a couple years ago, I think, and maybe again. I read a lot of scholarships from the San Francisco Unified School District, and I've always wondered, since I got on the Library Commission, what the sort of the synergy was between the libraries and the schools. So I was actually hoping to hear about more actual programs other than Summer Stride, which we're very familiar with. Like what goes on during the year, the school year? I know when I was in school, we had assignments like at the library. Does that still exist today, or has the internet taken over and kids don't need to go to the library anymore?
Oh, well, I shared some information about the different programs that we do with SFUS. In August, I gave a recap of our programs that we are doing with SFUSD throughout the school year beyond Summer Stride. And it looks, I'm happy to give you more information and connect you with a local librarian to see what it looks like on the ground. My guess at this point of the day, upstairs, there are many SFUSD students right now using the computer, doing their homework, connecting with the librarians in the mix, and also the main children's center. So it's very much living in our library spaces outside of the school.
So do the teachers or whoever establishes the curriculum in the schools, do they ever have, in the beginning of the year, sit down with the library staff and plan out a program for the year, or this is our?
Yeah, my understanding that could happen at a particular branch, and often it's with the teacher librarian. That's every single public school has a dedicated teacher librarian, so often you see it at that level, and they map out when they're going to do book clubs, when they have an author coming in. Just yesterday, we had Tommy Orange go to June Jordan High School to speak directly with students there. So it really is a very rich fabric of partnerships.
Does every school have their own library?
Every school has their own library. Every school has their own teacher librarian. The elementary schools are often shared by one individual, so that librarian will serve 2 schools. For
do
public
they have
schools.
Library degrees? I'm sorry if these are so.
They
such
have
simplistic
my
questions.
understanding is some do, but I believe it's a credential, a teaching credential that they hold.
Thank you.
Can also add, just to build a bit on what Christy was saying, I also understand that there are a lot of sort of relationships between schools and local branches that are hard for us to speak to right now. But another person who, if you squint at the first slide, you'll find in there is Brad, who is, oh, there we go. Yep, there's Brad in the back next to Kevin. And so he is in charge of library services. And I know that he's been a committed partner to this work as well. And the only reason he's not here right now is because he unfortunately had a conflict. So I want to recognize what you're saying, which is we're talking about data sharing. And your question is about programs, and I don't want to paper over that. I think it's a really important conversation to have. So I want to assure you that Brad is very willing to talk more about that at a future date when he is able to be here, or it doesn't have to be at this meeting either. But having a more deeper conversation about programs is certainly something that we'd all like to do.
So it's not, you feel there's a lot of room for growth, in other words,
Data sharing.
in data sharing, that this will result in better programming and more efficiencies.
Perhaps. To be honest, I don't feel like it's really my my place to comment on how much growth there could be. What I think the data sharing can do is help allocate the resources that there are. I don't have any effect on the budget, but I think in terms of just more information about how programs are marketed, where they are strengthened, that's the kind of thing that data sharing could help us do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wong?
Oh, wow, this microphone's loud. Geez, it's like, it's picking up really sensitively.
Maybe they can adjust it.
Let's try this again. Okay, better, yeah. Thank you, as always, Randy and Christy, we see you a lot and we love it. This is perfect. Like, the more we know about our programs, the better. I have two sets of questions. One is, obviously with the data-driven approach, it's often useful to pair that with a more anthropological approach that's more qualitative and follows, for example, individual students and their journeys through the school and library systems. Are there plans to do that, or is it more like focused on the data and analytics on the data alone right now?
Well, I should first say that again, to go into what we've done so far, what we're allowed to share with city agencies and certain select partners, of which SFPL is one, is like this fairly basic demographic data that allows us to do outreach. So that's this first chapter, which has been really great, and I think we all feel really successful. Where we go from here is really what we're talking about launching, which is a long way to say I'm not sure yet. But I actually love your idea of doing qualitative research. My research in graduate school is largely qualitative. I think it often gets a short shrift in all the talk about data that we have, but qualitative data is data too, and I would love to bring that into our discussion and love to talk to you more about that.
Great.
I'll just add to that. I think my approach is always let's understand our universe first with the quantitative, and then let's drill down to the qualitative to really understand the complete picture. In this case, this is really just the opening of hopefully a very insightful relationship with the school district in sharing data on both sides. And hopefully from there, we can really drill down into questions that have long-term implications for both sides of this city.
Totally, yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not like, this is amazing, and I'm just very excited for what's next. And just to provide some context for why I asked the question, right? Like, when you have data, it's like, it's structured in a certain way, but in many times you can't, there's some elements you don't even know to structure to begin with, and so you need these sort of like story-based approaches where you can revisit it and start to pick out more things as you examine that context over and over and over time. And so that's why it makes it interesting to pair those two together. My second question is on staffing. Like, who gets to work with you on this? Like, what are the team sizes on the library side, and then SFUSD? Like, what does the partnership look like on the ground?
I expect that my entire team, which is currently 3 with 1 on maternity leave, will be involved in this effort. Certainly, we have to take a look at how much data we're actually talking about and then scope and resource allocate from there. But it's such a huge opportunity. And it's something that libraries nationwide have been sort of struggling to crack the nut of. And we feel like with a tremendous partnership with our school district going forward in this way, we could be an industry leader in this. So it sort of depends, right, on what we have available and our resources and our demands on our time. But we fully intend to invest quite a bit of our resources in this effort on our side.
And on our side in the research planning and assessment shop, we have a large part of the department is dedicated to administering and analyzing the assessments, which is different from what I'm focused on. So on my side, it's more of the research and evaluation piece. There's about 10 of us. The part that's focused on partnerships, you're looking at it. But recently we expanded a little bit, and now we are 2, and some more growth perhaps in the future. So that's the focus would be a couple of us there, and that's honestly, it's a perfect example of what I was talking about before, where before it's like, yeah, great idea, so who's gonna do this? Partnership sounds like an extracurricular activity to some people, so it's something you need to build out time for. So I really appreciate the premise of your question, and I think that I'm fortunate to have a position at the school district where people respect carving out that space.
Hopefully many more to come. And Randy, I'll close by saying I love what you just said there about opportunity, and this is why I appreciate this institution, all of San Francisco's institutions so much. I mean, I see opportunity everywhere, right? Like there's so much here, but if this is one element, like how many other elements are there in our universe? Is there like boundless opportunity? So I really appreciate that you said that.
Thank you.
If I may, I just want to bring in the youth librarians. We have a dedicated children's librarian at every single location. We often have a part-time youth services librarian or a part-time teen librarian, but they would be carrying out the outreach. So we're working really closely with our chief of branches and chief of main to make sure that we're all aligned and committed to making a difference in the lives of students.
Amazing. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner? No, can you go ahead?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Devin, Chrissy, and Randy for the great presentation. One of my questions was going to be, what do you see as success? But you basically answered it with a couple of the other questions. So my follow-up is, so when are you going to tell us about the successes? So, like next year? No, I'm just kidding. And I appreciate that San Francisco Unified School District doubled their enforcement of or partnership with us, and just this presentation, it sounds like. But I look forward to a lot of the new data that's coming, and I know I hope that we get another one of the awards to be the #1 in the nation. So thank you all for all your work, and I look forward to more.
Commissioner Wolf?
Thank you. That was fantastic, and I guess what really inspires me is that you all like each other. It seems like you like each other, because this is not going to be an easy task. I think when you talk about opportunity, I mean, the statistics that you presented, I think there's no bigger priority than providing opportunities for our youth for the future. And if we don't do that, then we might as well just close shop. I mean, that is our future. So I'm just wondering, what do you see as the obstacles moving forward, or what are the resources you need to make this successful? How can we help to make this a priority? Okay, I know you want more staff and you want more money, but are there? But really, I mean, what are the obstacles? It sounds like the laws are very strict, but how do we get you going so that this really does make a difference in these kids' lives?
Yeah, I mean, I can start by saying that a lot of it is legalese. Some of it's technical, but I think we're lucky in that through the position that I've had to set up these kinds of arrangements before. I'll give you one quick example. So we are careful, really careful with student data. I think in my department we're actually more careful than other similar departments at other districts. We try really carefully to abide by FERPA and treat student data as something that's precious and something that we should not be careless with. So one of the things that we can do that is fully, I feel, in respect of FERPA, which is that federal law that protects it, certainly it abides by FERPA, is to have data shared back to me that I'm allowed to access, and then I can aggregate it. So I'll give you an example. Let's see if I got a list back of students who were not engaged in the library. With the data access that I have, I could immediately look at what's the GPA of these kids? What are their test scores? Anything else I want to know about them. Now, sharing that information then back out to the world would be something that you need to be very careful about. At an individual level, you can't do that under most circumstances. But what I can do as a district employee is I can digest that data, and then I could say to the library, what I recommend based on my analysis is that you might think about increasing your partnership with these 10 schools. So I haven't said a thing about an individual student. And in that way, you're protecting student privacy as you still share very important information. So that's one example.
And of course, on the library side, we want to be very respectful and intentional about patron privacy as well. We don't have a FERPA per se, but we have a patron privacy policy that we adhere to. And we want to ensure, as part of the data use agreement negotiation that we will do with the school district, that both sides are completely protected in privacy so that we can ensure great information flowing both ways, but also ensure that no individual would be somehow disrupted in their privacy.
Right. Thank you.
I would just add that this is not like a drop-in and fix. This is we need to build sustainability into this outreach and engagement. So we're not just dropping in library cards and promoting libraries. We're building relationships so we can see those students thrive inside their schools and outside in their libraries.
Right. Thank you.
I'll add one more piece, which is in addition to making sure we understand well the rules and any sort of legal barriers that might be and operating with respect to them. There's also there's interpersonal relationships. It's a huge part of partnership. I think I'd be remiss not to mention that. And so, like with the last answer, I would say it's a barrier, but then talk about why it shouldn't be one, which is that we have Brad. We saw Brad last night, and he's like, hey, what are we doing next? And this is the person who's in charge of library services. So he's not looking at SFPL and thinking, there's my competitor. We have our school libraries and the city libraries, this other entity, and we do the same thing. And it's not that kind of relationship. It's how can we build each other up? How can we take our respective expertise and do right by the kids? So I think that's another piece of it is I think with partnership writ large, interpersonal relationships can be tough. You don't want to step on toes. And I think one place where we're lucky in San Francisco is that I think people are pretty hungry to work together.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we look forward to hearing more about this process, and I think this is critical. There's some outcomes in the city for certain groups of students that's absolutely unacceptable, and it has been for a long time. So anything that the San Francisco Public Library can do in this partnership with SFPL to do our duty to improve that, you have our support. You have my support personally as a president of the commission. I want to thank you for the time and the efforts that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our third item, which is a library commission meeting schedule for next year, 2020. And this is an actionable item, and I'm going to turn it over to the city librarian.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardell. I believe the Library Commission schedule for the calendar year 2020 is in your packets. As you mentioned, this is an action item. So this schedule is a draft, and it is here for your perusal and discussion. It can be amended as you see best fit. So I will defer to you and the commissioners.
Thank you so much, City Librarian. We have this in front of us, Commissioners, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and move it to public comment, and then we'll have a discussion and response to this, okay? So at this time, we have a public comment on this particular item. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. The draft Library Commission 2020 meeting schedule, which is available in the back and the front, looks basically the same as it has been for the last few years, although prior to that there were 2 meetings per month. You will have on occasion cut public comment on very critical issues and very critical meetings because, according to the chair, there's a lot of items on the agenda. That is entirely your doing. You set the agenda in conjunction with the city librarian. If the Library Commission has to cut public comment, then how about doing what every other organization has done and can do, and what the Library Commission itself has done for many, many years, and that is 2 meetings a month. Or when I started going to Library Commission meetings, a full commission meeting and 2 committee meetings each month, 3 altogether. I think it's unconscionable that the Library Commission would claim it needs to cut public comment because it hasn't had enough time, because the agenda is big. Then have 2 meetings a month and take your time with things. Have 2 meetings before an action is taken. That's what the 3 meetings a month in the past permitted. The subcommittee or the committee would hear an issue, have a discussion, public input, and then a week or 2 later, the full commission would hear the same item with an opportunity to take into account what the committees had heard and had discussed. Secondly, we've asked this before, many other organizations that at least have a pretense of catering for the public have their meetings later in the day and not during most people's daytime work schedule. As far as I'm concerned, this makes it convenient to have people like the Friends come, makes it convenient for you to exclude library workers and the public who may be otherwise occupied during the business day. So we ask you to start later. In Berkeley, public meetings, city council meetings start at 7. I'm not saying you need to start at 7, but later than 4:30. I'd certainly suggest you have more meetings per month as you used to for many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further public comment? Seeing that there's none, we're going to move into our commission discussion. Commissioners, before you, you have the proposed draft schedule for the San Francisco Public Library Commission for 2020 calendar year. And before us, we also have an opportunity to discuss as well as take an action. So I leave it, it's open to you right now.
I move.
We have Commissioner Lee, yes?
Second.
You, wait a minute, what was that you said? You move?
Approve the schedule. I move to approve the schedule.
Make sure you say it into the mic, please.
Yeah, I move to approve the schedule.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve this schedule. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. I call the question. All those in favor to approve the schedule as it is drafted, say aye.
Aye.
All those who are opposed. The schedule as it's drafted will be, has been approved, and we'll move forward for this for the 2020, for next year, calendar year of 2020. So we're going to move into our item number 4, which is our fiscal year budget discussions for both 2021 and 2022. The way that the library budget is crafted is that we are always 2 years ahead of even the current cycle, and so we have our Chief Operating Officer who is here to discuss the proposed budgets for 2021 and the 2022 budget priorities.
Thank you, Commission President. Good afternoon or good evening to the Commission and to the public. I'm going to provide an overview of our budget cycle. I'll start off with a little bit of a reminder of where we were with the last budget cycle, and then just introduce how the process will go for the upcoming cycle. So as I mentioned, a look back, the last budget cycle we had covered fiscal year 20 and 21. And as you can see here in the on the table, the current year budget for fiscal 20 is $171.6 million, and that's for a total full-time equivalent employee count of 701 employees on a net basis. What that growth of 5 was for, it was a transfer of authority in the custodial positions from the real estate department over to the library. Then the proposed budget that was approved in June and July of this year at the Board of Supervisors and with the mayor was $168.9 million, which is a slight reduction over the fiscal year 20 amount. The budget that was approved at the board and with the mayor included almost all of the items that the commission had approved in February of 2019. Those detailed investments are provided in attachment 1 that's been provided several times, but is also included with this presentation here. The key differences, there were 2 really big key differences between what the commission approved in February of 2019 and the final budget, and that really was additional investments in capital for both Chinatown and Ocean View, with additional monies from returned from the state of around $2 million apiece. And then the other investment that the commission had wanted to do was an additional $100,000 for our health and safety associates through the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. However, as I indicated this summer when we first talked about this, that department was not able to take on that additional capacity that budget cycle. This is just a visual representation of what the budget looks like for fiscal year 20 at $171.6 million. As you can see, the highest or the largest category of expenditures is for the branch division, with both its youth services and its other services totaling nearly $32 million. The next highest category is in our capital investments at $28 million. And then following that is our collections and technical services at $25.8 million, which does include the collections budget of over $17.6 million. Just a little bit of a reminder of what you've already improved as investments for fiscal year 21 in the last cycle was a growth in our e-collections budget by about $2 million. Continued investments in IT storage capacity, around $100,000, sustaining investments in youth engagement programming, and allocating a strong investment in the Chinatown renovation project of $20 million. This is our standard calendar for the budget process. You can see it's broken out into major categories of budget development and budget negotiations. Currently, we're in the budget development phase, and we're going to start off by just a high-level overview with you about how the process will work, and then we'll come back over time and discuss the details of investments that will be presented to the Commission between the months of December and February, and at that point, we'll ask you to approve the budget. From there, we move into negotiations with the Mayor's Office and the Board of Supervisors. This is what we do every cycle. So as a highlight, this is a rolling 2-year budget, as our president mentioned, and for this cycle, it's covering fiscal years 21 and 22, and that covers July 2020 through June 2022. The Library Preservation Fund estimates, as well as our fund balance estimates, should be available in December of this year. So I'll provide those updates when I have those figures, and hopefully I'll have them in time for the meeting. Sometimes I don't get them until last second, but whatever I have available, we will definitely provide to the commission. As standard at this time of year, our unknowns tend to be what is going to happen at the state level. That has less impact on the library because we only have a small component of our budget that's from state funding, and that's for our Project READ program. And then the departmental work order agreements, the library does pay other departments for the services that are provided. So as they build their budgets, that will have an impact on us, as well as any special requests that we might have of other departments. Our budget is always built based on our strategic and budget priorities. The idea there is to think about what our community needs are evolving into, and how do we continue to invest in our foundational items in our budget. These budget priorities and strategic priorities are really the guideposts for us as we build out our budget investments. These categories have not changed over the last several years, so I'll just quickly run through them. Literacy and learning, youth engagement, organizational excellence, digital strategies, facilities maintenance and infrastructure, partnerships for excellence, and they all really culminate in being a premier urban library. And then just a quick look forward, some of the key investments that you can anticipate seeing from us in the next couple months would be around capital planning, collection enhancements, facilities management investments, so maintaining our investments in our facilities over time, program support, and ongoing technology refreshment and enhancements, and then also any input that the commission has to provide or anything else that we hear from our staff as we go through the budget development process. So that concludes the high-level presentation. We will come back again in December and January and February with detailed information about the proposed investments. I'm available if you have questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Just I forgot to mention that if you did come in late, there's all the materials for the budget in the back, so make sure that you have that. But at this time, we're going to open up the public comment.
Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. Once again, you have concealed and only spoken orally about the books and materials budget. Your pie chart shows $25.75 million for collections and technical services, parens, including collections. So now the collections are in parentheses, not even a major issue. This is part of, as far as I'm concerned, a long-time policy at the library, bad policy or wrong policy of book de-emphasis. And by books, I don't just mean books necessarily, but what you provide to patrons, books and materials. There's no indication here of whether the book budget has gone an inch or a mile above or below where it used to be, although you take great pains to point out a $1.99 million increase in the electronic materials. $2 million increase, a huge increase. You don't say the percentage, but it looks like about 25% from the prior year. No indication of whether the book budget is going up by even 1 penny. This needs to be shown as it has in the past and not concealed as it is in this document. We have free and equal access as the first words of the library's slogan. But where's the free and equal access to the folks who do not have a computer, who do not have the software for all of the varied platforms that you have for the electronic materials? It used to be when you came into an institution, including the library, that you had the maximum service. You could see everything that they had. You could get access to everything and everybody there. That's not true for the electronic materials. Unfortunately, you have to pay to play. And once again, this hurts your poorest people the most. If you don't have the platform for the many, many varied platforms of electronic materials, tough luck. You can be in any branch or any main library or the main library. You can't even see what it looks like if you didn't buy your own technology, hardware, and software. There's also the question of reduced service. For example, the notices. How much did the print notices cost? How much is the cut? How much of an effect on the patrons? 19,000 people no longer can get printed notices that a book has arrived for them or where it's located or for how long. How about putting that into the budget, and let's discuss how much you've saved by cutting that out.
Thank you. Further public comment.
Good evening, me again. Okay, I'm going to, this is where I would address it, so I apologize for before. But really, what is it going to save the budget to not have paper notices? Formerly being homeless and being a master's, this place was a sacred place for me. And if I lost a book, if I didn't notice, if I forgot, if I mentally forgot, I told some people in my SRO that don't have computer access, and he reads all the time. He's like, what? He goes, what if I'm late? If you're late, you're going to be cut off of services. Why are you colonizing the internet or any type of shit, stuff like that, when we have to be the library, accessible to everybody at every means? Not everybody is computer literate. Not everybody feels comfortable even using the internet anymore. It is killing us. And if we're not going to bring that in, you can't join the rest of the world with editing in what you think should be. And that's what technology does. You're editing out any human connection or a thought or a memory to somebody via mail that may use that today. Don't discredit those people. You're discrediting a very small amount of that budget for people that are dependent on it. So I hope you understand that, speaking from someone who has used that. And to this day, I have so much in my email. If I forget a book that's at an academic level, my gosh, I'm wasting someone else's chance to have that book. So a simple reminder is not always this phone. So please get real. We have to stay real. This is the only place that is real and still in print. So leave it open to the public that way. I ask you, especially for my income and the people that I know that utilize that as a service, their P.O. box. It's a reminder. You also think of seniors, and some people don't remember. So please keep that. I think it's really important.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Further public comment? Okay, seeing that there's none, commissioners, you have our COO here, Maureen, who's provided you the first presentation of the budget, the 2-year cycle. There's more information that's forthcoming, as she has said, but you have, she's very dutiful to make sure that information that she does have, she brings it to us. This is not, she's not seeking any approval because we're not at that phase, but are there any questions that you have or comments that you have for her? Now is the time to do that.
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time, so stop me if I'm wrong. But is there a budget savings about not sending the printed notices?
There would be a savings in print and mailing costs, but I don't know what those specific costs would be. We can give an estimate when we present again in the future. what's not being printed would be the holds notices. So there are print notices still going out for overdue, billed items. So there still is some print notices. There are still some print notices going out. It's just not all categories.
Okay, so maybe Michael wants to talk about that later.
We can discuss it more with the upcoming budget discussions. Unless you want to add anything now.
I would just reassure the commission that the San Francisco Public Library is committed to providing access to everybody in our community. There are multiple opportunities for all of our patrons to stay connected, to monitor their accounts. We have 28 libraries. They're all open 7 days a week. We're the largest free provider of internet access in the community. So we take very seriously bridging the digital divide as one of our top priorities. The discontinuance of print notices is really a widespread practice in the industry as more and more people rely on email notification. However, we do respect the rights and the preferences of patrons who opt not to set up an email account, and they can still receive their notifications via telephone, or they can always ask library staff for the status of their requested items.
So it was more industry practice than it was a budget item.
We're on the budget.
Yeah. Okay.
Focus on the budget. Any more comments on discussion on the budget? Yes.
Thank you, Maureen and Michael, for your continued really great work on the budget and planning. It makes our job a lot easier, and we really appreciate it. I just had a quick question, which was, this is how are you feeling about the eliminating fines, and has that impacted the budget, or do you have any sense about how that's working?
Sure. So from a revenue perspective, we had built in assumptions on the reduction of revenue from eliminating fines, and the estimated amount was around $300,000. And given our robust annual allocation of the Library Preservation Fund, we didn't see that as a problematic amount for the library to be able to absorb.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for this first look at the 2-year budget cycle? Seeing that there's none, we want to thank you, Maureen, for giving us these figures and these priorities and where we're at. We know that you'll be coming back in December, and then we'll see you again in January, and then in February we'll have the opportunity to approve the budget. So we will hear at least 2 more times from Maureen and have opportunity to discuss these specifics.
Thank you.
So moving on in our agenda, we are at the moment of our City Librarian's report. This is an opportunity for the City Librarian to update us and report on recent activities and make announcements from the SFPL.
Thank you, President Wardell. We have a number of presentations this evening, and I'm pleased to introduce our first presenter. Bill Kolb is the library's digital strategist, and he's going to be sharing a preview of the library's new website set to come online before the end of the year.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, commissioners. So as Michael said, I'm the library's digital strategist. Trained as a librarian, currently working in IT. Providing that sort of integration point between the library staff and the IT staff, which is why I'm talking to you tonight, not because I actually do anything in terms of actually developing a new website. I'm just sort of chatting about it. So I'm very excited to present this to you tonight because we are dangerously close to having a brand new website. It's coming. It's an early Christmas present for all of you. I want to give you a little bit of background on the current website, how we got to where we are now, and then some sort of signposting for where we're headed, and I'm going to show you some pretty pictures. So the current site launched way back in February of 2010. It's served us well. It was built specifically for the library, not as a sort of a package or anything like that. And it's time for a refresh. Things have changed in the online environment, and it's time for the library to catch up a little bit. So quite some time ago, you might have heard of a vendor called Canopy that we hired to develop the architecture for a new website. They did that for us. We've done a lot of thinking and planning since then, and recently, earlier this year, we hired a new vendor to build this brand new website. So two different vendors working on the same project. It might sound strange. Think of it a little bit like a construction project. The Canopy vendor was the architect, and the new vendor, Third and Grove, is like the construction crew. And they're actively constructing right now, probably as we speak. The integration point between the library and this vendor has primarily been the acting web services manager, Adam Markosian, who works with me. He has been working with Third and Grove since May to share with them all of the good work that Canopy did for us, all of the sort of random bits of information and important integration points that we have on our site as it stands, so that they could intelligently build out the new site. The development on the new site began in earnest in July, and it's now November. We are really hustling through this process. In July, it seemed like December was a long way away, and now I can't believe it's already here. So T-minus 22 days to launch. And I'm just showing you some of the steps that we've gone through already. That planning and development that started in July, really kind of wrapped up early this month, and now we're just in full development mode. Actually, the final content migration actually happened last week. They did an initial pull where they took all of the content that is on our current site and they pulled it into the new website. And then they had to do it again because that's the way these things work. So some things didn't move over all the way. And so now we're in a lot of cleanup phase, making sure that everything lines up, all of our links are working and things like that. The legacy site, the existing website, sfpl.org, anything that gets added to that site now is not going to show up on the new site. We can still put stuff on the new site, but anything that we add to the old site now isn't getting moved over. We've already done 2 rounds of IT staff training, so our web development team is getting trained by our vendor on how to drive this car once they give us the keys. We are working on training for frontline library staff because they also have to interact with this site. In addition to the overall web presence that we have, we're developing in parallel a new events calendar, which is a really important part of our web presence because it lets our patrons know all of the wonderful programs that we're showcasing for them and what time they are and where they are and how they can get access to those services that we provide. Frontline staff deals a lot with the event calendar, so we're actively developing training for that as well. The Drupal content freeze, which is, so the new site is being built on a web development platform called Drupal 8. It's the most modern open source web development platform. That's all of the development that we do, every new page that we've built, all of the migrated content that's on shiny new pages, all of that freezes on December 6th in anticipation of launch day. And darn, that's an old slide. December 10 is actually our launch day, so it's, like I said, 22 days from now. I want to show you some images of what you can expect to see when you log into sfpl.org on December 10 of this year. Here's a look at our homepage. As you can see, the color scheme is all very different, and all of this, there was a lot of staff planning and collaboration with Canopy to get the look and feel of this right. But essentially, it's a website with which most folks will be familiar. You'll see there at the bottom, it's a little bit small, and I apologize for that, but there is that banner on the bottom that says cookies on sfpl.org. Cookies are a mechanism by which a lot of websites sort of pay attention to what you're doing when you're using the website, so that the next time you come back, you might have a better experience. It tracks a very little bit of information about you while you're using the website. We give our patrons an opportunity to opt out of that. If they don't want to engage with cookies and they start fresh every time, we're totally okay with that. That banner will pop up so that people have that opportunity. One of the things that's really changed since our original site launched in the last 10 years or so is that people are a lot more accustomed to sort of scrolling through longer web pages. It used to be people wanted to have a web page just be one single page without a lot of scrolling down. Now we have to scroll a little bit more because we're used to it on our phones, and people have become accustomed to it on our web page. So I'm going to show you some views that sort of scroll down the home page. So you saw that first view that had the banner about cookies. Once you click that, this is what you're looking at. And this central image here with the sort of tiles that say managing people and conflicts, great teen book swap. Those are highlights. We currently have highlights on our web page now. These give a lot more sort of opportunity for Michelle Jeffers and the CPP staff to make them really pop and really exciting for our users. Also, you'll see the arrows on either side. That means it's a carousel, so you can scroll left or right to see additional content. Again, it gives us our staff opportunity to show off even more. Scrolling down a little bit farther, these are book carousels, so these pull directly from our catalog, show content that we hold that patrons can borrow. And the nice thing about these book carousels is that they pull from our current catalog. They're lists that have been built and curated by library staff, and we've captured all of that work. Nobody has to redo anything, so we've valued the work that's already been put into curating this content, and then we can put these carousels on basically any page on the site. So it gives librarians, other library staff, the opportunity to highlight how our collection supports our other efforts. Scrolling a little bit more, there are some additional tiles, and again, you see those arrows on either side that allow you to scroll through the carousel. I'm excited about how this page doesn't look already right now. One of the things that our web development team talks about is they do what they call design sprints, where they have a really finite goal that they plan to hit on a certain day. And I now understand why they call them sprints, because every time they finish, I feel like I need to sit down and catch my breath. As of yesterday, those sort of generic punch card looking tiles now have meaningful icon images that will help patrons navigate to the resources that they need on our page. Which is maybe more exciting to me than it is to anybody else here, because getting those icons was tricky. Oh, sorry, let me back up really quick. So right beneath the Research and Learn carousel, you'll see the link to the upcoming events and exhibits. And if you click on that, over to the far right, it says See All Events. If you click on that, you end up on this really clean, very easy to read, color-coded events and exhibits page. We're really excited about this product. We think that it's going to give our patrons a lot more agency over their experience with library programs. You can sort it and search it a lot more easily than you can our current product. Here's another calendar view. You can see the color coding, and we've added the key. That just happened recently also. So that you can see that events that are flagged in blue are for adults, orange for teens, green for family. And the nice thing is that color theming follows through all of the pages on the website. So the kids pages have a primarily green sort of theming to them. The adult pages primarily blue, teen primarily orange. This is maybe the most exciting thing about the new site. And it's that this search bar that I highlighted with lots of red arrows because I wanted to make sure you saw it, is one search to rule them all. Currently on our site, you have to make a choice about what kind of content you're searching before you start searching. And you can search site content, you can search events, or you can search the catalog. With this, you search everything at once and you get meaningful results on the very next page. So you can see on the left there, you're going to get 10 results that come pulled directly from our catalog in that red box. And then on the right, stacked on top of each other, the purple box is articles and database results. So that's pulling live results from these subscription databases that we already have as resources for our patrons. And beneath that in the green box, it's events, services, it's any of our website content, FAQ, get to know the library kind of information. And it's all facilitated through that one simple search box. The web developers call it a bento box search result. And every time we talk about the catalog, I get hungry. So going back to the home page, and I do want to highlight for you that this is a standard convention, but we also think it looks really nice because we're proud of our logo. Clicking on the logo in the top left, the Nautilus, gets you back to our home page from wherever you are on the site, which is nice. This blue bar in the middle at the top there will get you to the library locations, and per the City Librarian's directions, there's now an icon affiliated with that library locations label, and the font size is bigger already.
Thank you.
I promise, Michael. So clicking on that takes you to this really easy to read, very informational page about our libraries. We're very pleased that the green box that shows that libraries are open or closed makes it really easy for patrons to figure out, what's the nearest library to me that's open right now if I really need to get in. If I have a library emergency, I know where I can go. It happens. Also, that the Google map there on the left will be working better. The integration with the Google mapping is still in development and tricky, but we're on a good path there. And you can click into those locations for additional exciting information. So each library has its own page that will show its open hours, its location, contact information, and current events that are happening at that library. And that content can be curated by library staff on the ground at that location. I want to talk to you a little bit about the team here that is doing this work for us, because they often work in the shadows and don't get a lot of praise. Adam Markosian, as I mentioned, is the acting web services manager. He has been an incredible integration point between the library and the Third and Grove team. He's really doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of making sure that the development works right. He would be talking to you tonight, except that he is a man of very few words, and nobody can seem to get me to shut up. So that sort of worked out for both of us. Alicia Wong works in IT. She's a project manager. She's a whiz at contracts and making sure that we're hitting our benchmarks, paying what we owe, and not paying more than that, which we appreciate. Nanique Sipple is an on-site in-house Drupal developer. She's actively working on the booked product, which is the calendar system that we have. And it's a big job, so she's taken on a lot. And Ken Louie works in IT as well. He is in networks, and he makes sure that things connect and I don't understand. But we have meetings with him, and he understands why something isn't working, and then the next day it does. So we value his contribution greatly. And that's probably enough for the evening. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for your leadership. I want to echo Bill's sentiment. It's a small but mighty team, and one of the things I'm really excited about is the underlying architecture moving from an archaic language, probably HTML something, to Drupal 8 now. So this is going to empower more of our staff throughout the organization to help maintain the website and keep it current. Okay, so next I'd like to highlight the FY19 annual report, and fiscal year 19 was another banner year for the organization. San Francisco Public Library was rated the highest rated department of city government ever, with our A- rating in the Controller's Biennial Survey. And this accomplishment and the entire year's achievements were creatively documented by Michelle Jeffers and her talented public affairs team in the annual report card. You all have a copy in your packets. Of note, library utilization remains robust, with the library achieving the highest circulation we've ever achieved on record at 11.7 million this past year. So I hope you all take pride in this past year's accomplishments. It's now my pleasure to introduce Michelle Jeffers, Chief of Community Programs and Partnerships.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, commissioners, for having me here this evening. As he mentioned, I still am Michelle Jeffers, Chief of Community Programs and Partnerships. This is my favorite. I have the honor of presenting to you many times over the course of the year, but I have to say, this is my favorite time to present to you every year because it means that the annual report is completed. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you all have it in your hands and have had a chance to marvel at its comprehensiveness. As Michael said, and as you can tell, our design of the report is modeled after a modern day report card. It's got engaging factoids and statistics, readable and friendly text, lots of bright and colorful photos that showcase our world-class library system. And I suppose you can guess why we did the report card, because we got an A. Then we were also the first city agency ever to do so. And as a really solid B student all my life, I'm really proud to work for an A agency. I'm really so happy to finally get my GPA up. Yes. It really makes me feel good. But we pin this report, of course, really to the excellent work that the Office of the Controller's City Performance Unit did on the biennial city survey, also known as the City Report Card. So we sprinkled their metrics throughout the report with highlights from our own achievements that reflect on those metrics, and also highlighted other achievements that we thought were important to bring forth that might not have been measured in the city report card. And I really wanted to highlight for you these few pages. Of course, I don't want to spoil the report. You can spend your time reading the whole thing. But these pages highlight the things that the city loves us the most for. They love, and this is what they give us the highest grades for, really, is our strong, strong collections of books and databases and materials, our beautiful neighborhood libraries, our amazing apps, and our wealth of online resources. Again, I hope you would get a chance to read it. It's a real page turner, I'll tell you that. But enjoy the annual report, and I will see you next year at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. In closing, I recently had the pleasure of attending the California Library Association annual conference in Pasadena, and I had the privilege of introducing our retired city librarian, Luis Herrera, as a 2019 inductee into the California Library Association Hall of Fame. He was joined by his predecessor, retired city librarian Susan Hildreth, on this year's slate of inductees. But the real highlight of the conference was seeing our own Ellen Riley, graphic artist, and Michelle Jeffers, Chief of Community Programs and Partnerships. They took home the PR Excellence Award for the incredible collateral that they produce and create for our cultural awareness programming. In addition to winning the PR Excellence Award, they also took home Best in Show, which is the overall grand prize. It's the most coveted award at this award ceremony. So we're very proud of Michelle and Ellen. We have an incredible talent pool. It was a special year for for SFPL, and that concludes the City Librarian's report.
Thank you so much. We're going to move into our public comment phase on this agenda item.
Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. We're always glad for reports, and we certainly have comments. First of all, Mr. Kolb referenced the web page revamp as similar to an architectural design. Interestingly, there wasn't one mention nor any evidence provided that the person living in the house was ever consulted about how it should look or feel or be designed. The person in the house who's using the house, who commissioned the house, who's most likely to be affected by the house for years. And that would be the library users. There's no evidence that this commission ever discussed or approved any particulars of this revamp. What were the goals? What were the objectives? What were the problems that were going to be overcome by a revamped design? Not one word. And I think that that is appalling. There's a very serious issue with cookies in your unnumbered page. I've asked this before. Unnumbered pages, especially when they go upside down and right side up. SFPL.org homepage has a small print opt out, it looks like, though it's not clear. And none of you has asked about it. With respect to cookies, cookies are generally known to be the website's way of spying on the user and collecting information of all kinds from the user and from the user's computer. It is outrageous that the library would be spying on the users of its home page. And I think it's appalling that there's even that option. Cookies should not be something that the library sends out. And as many people may have experienced at various times, the refusal to allow cookies often results in degraded, slower, or non-existent services. This should have been thoroughly discussed with the Library Commission and the public, and I don't see any evidence of that. Getting on to this city survey, congratulations. Of course, the library is always among the top scorers because it doesn't arrest anybody, put anybody in jail, and in general doesn't fine anybody, although you've reduced the costs to the users by getting rid of fines. I'm concerned about the collections not having the top rating in this page
Further
over
public
here.
comment, please.
Thank you very much.
Further public comment? Seeing that there is none, commissioners, is there any commentary and or questions in regard to the city librarian's report?
I've got a couple.
Yes, Commissioner Huang.
Thank you, everyone, for the presentations as always. I love that this slide is up right now because I feel like we could collect every single one of those posters on the right and, like, you know, you print it on nice paper and frame it at home and everything. It'd be nice. I just a couple of broader comments. One, just for everyone's awareness, cookies have actually been in existence on the internet since the existence of the actual internet. Like, you know, if we wanted to talk about like cookies, which, you know, there's a philosophical argument for and against it, right? Like we would have to, you know, go against quite a bit of history and existing kind of material out there. And second of all, I would love to know if anyone else on the commission has ever received an invitation from any government agency on their input for any .gov website, California government agency website. I've never gotten one. In fact, like what I learned about design is that effective design often is completely ruined the more people you add to it, because all of a sudden you're designing by committee, and then the more things you add to it, it gets like terribly ugly. I'm reminded of that that car that was designed like a couple decades ago, where like they took every single popular feature everyone ever wanted, put it in a single car, and they sold like 100 or something because it was so bad. So just two general comments there. I did have one question for Bill on the website. I noticed on the top, that navigation bar, maybe we can scroll back to one of the screenshots of the homepage. Yeah, that should be fine there. On the top there, it says English, and then there's Spanish and Chinese there. Is Tagalog also planned for the launch?
It is not planned for the launch, that's for sure. Generally speaking, our language access ordinance requires that we have the English, the Spanish, and the Chinese.
Okay.
And we have those fully built out on the current site, and that is going to be consistent on the new site.
Got it.
I know that we are offering more options in more languages, and Tagalog is one of them that we're emphasizing.
Okay.
But that's not planned for the launch.
Got it. And someone might know this better than I do, maybe the City Librarian. How does this relate to, I know like when I'm riding the bus, for example, they make all their announcements, their pre-recorded announcements in those 4 languages. Are we subject to that same requirement, or is this a different standard?
We are fully compliant with the language access ordinance. I don't know, Michelle, she is our liaison and coordinator to the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, so she's probably in a better position to speak to this.
So the ordinance requires it for anything that has to do with direct access to services. So it's why like our library card and our notices are all translated also, but the general website does not have to be translated at this time, but it is a goal.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. I love the design. It feels very like friendly government agency, which I think is like a new trend in the last few years, which I love.
We're trying to take that minus off of the A for next year.
Commissioner Wolf?
Thank you again. It's always great to have this portion of the meeting because I always learn something. Bill, before you sit down, I had a couple of questions. I think this website looks fantastic, and I can't wait to have it up and running, and I'm sure you are too.
Me both. Yeah.
I'm just curious about whether what accommodations you're making for an app that then is upgraded with that, because I'm a great lover of using the app, and I use it all the time.
Yes.
And it probably needs a little upgrading.
My apologies. So in my haste and my excitement about like the bento box, because I haven't had dinner yet, I forgot to mention that one of the features of Drupal 8, the development platform, is that it scales to mobile. Right. So every page that you see is going to present itself on your mobile device in whatever aspect ratio makes the most sense for that device.
Fantastic.
So iPads and tablets are a little bit different than, say, the phone, but it will scale in all of those directions. The app that you're talking about is, I think, maybe the app that you're talking about. I currently have the SFPL app on my device where I basically place all of my holds.
Correct.
That's not a product that's under our control. That's a product that we get through BiblioCommons, which is the catalog. Thank you. Yeah. So that's a partnership, and we offer feedback on that, but we don't control it. But we do control this.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful.
Commissioner Ono?
Hi, Bill. Sorry.
Should I just stay here?
Yes.
Cool.
Sorry about that. As soon as you started talking about the app, I was not playing on my phone in case anyone was looking out there. I was going to the app that I have.
We're not here to judge.
Going along with you.
Yeah.
So this is not going to be updated. Is that what you just?
I can't see what you're showing me.
Yeah, it's the. Yeah, I can't.
So the app is just to check out the books.
There are many apps that are connected to our website currently, things like Libby or Overdrive, the SFPL app, which is our catalog app. There's some other things as well. And again, those are third-party vendor products that we integrate with our webpage, but we don't control. So the integration will still be there, and you'll still be able to access those things. None of that changes. Our catalog doesn't change at all as a result of this. This is really like the front door.
Okay. Because it's called SFPL.org, I guess, is the one.
It is confusing because I think the app is called SFPL.org and our website is also SFPL.org, but those aren't not entirely the same thing. But if you open a web browser on your phone and you go to SFPL.org, what you see right now is really, really hard to use on your small screen device. What you will see on December 10th is this writ small.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I know your team is small and mighty, but thank them all. I've done a migration of a database, and so I kind of know what your team's going through, and I don't envy them, especially with the deadline of December 10th coming up. So tell them I appreciate that.
Thank you for that, I will.
And I also wanted to thank Michelle and her team, and congratulations on another win. And I'm glad for Susan and for Luis to Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Lee?
I'd like to sort of echo one question from the public, because I'm also interested in that. The website, besides its modern looking, aesthetics, pleasing, and what have you, what analytics or what metrics are being used to measure the success of the website revamp?
Thank you for that question. We have for some time been using Google Analytics to measure the activity on our existing pages. We're continuing to do that, and one of the most concerted efforts with the web development process and the vendor that we're working with, Third and Grove, is search engine optimization and analytics optimization. So they are actually cleaning up all of our Google Analytics for us as part of our migration to the new site, so that we'll be able to tease more meaningful data out of the site analytics going forward, without sunsetting the old data, so that we'll still be able to make the comparisons in activity level and such, and monitor sort of the amount of time that people spend on pages and if they click through or if they stall out and leave, things like that. So we have metrics on that, and we're going to be continuing to capture that, and we hope in a more intelligent and active way.
Great.
Without tracking the activity of any individual, just to be clear. That's just trends.
Right.
Yeah.
That actually is the second question that I was going to ask is, in the public, this says about, one is about the tracking, the other thing is about the cookie with the perception of tracking, but certainly cookie in organization do use them as tracking. Now, I'm sure that, or am I correct in assuming that there is a policy whereby people, the public, when they log on to the website, they will be reminded that,
yes,
there is a policy
right,
such that, like the equivalency of the European, the GDPR?
Correct. Yeah, and the GDPR comes up in our conversations with the development team, even though we're not subject to it, just because that seems to be the sort of trend in web development, and being especially responsible with people's information. The cookie experience on our new site is not really an opt-in, and it's not really an opt-out. It's just an opt. You have an option every time you come to that page. When you've selected it, it will be persistent on your device. So if you opt out of cookies, you won't be using cookies, and we're not going to trick you into using them again. So we're doing our best to give our users agency over that experience.
So when there was a public that was concerned, then certainly there's a policy that he or she would be able to retrieve from the website to say that these are the things that we do and these are the things we don't do.
We're not, the library is not actually tracking your activity using cookies. Primarily what they're used for is to sort of save your settings so that your next experience, you don't have to redo everything. But that's not, it's also not set in stone. You can actually always opt out of the cookies experience. So if you have any problems with that.
Right.
A lot of our users have expressed sort of frustration that they don't already have that functionality because it's a common feature of a lot of the websites that most people use now.
Yeah. I'm glad you also answered the third question the public raised about the user participation, but apparently that you have already covered all the bases. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much for
Thank you
this beautiful report. Thank you for the school report, Michelle. I love that design. And thank you for the restructuring of the website. We can't wait to see it on December 10th and not December 12th. So we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes of October 17th. This requires an action by the members of the commission, and we are going to go into public comment on this agenda item.
Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. In some respects, these minutes are an improvement. I have some additional improvements, if you like. The public's comments under the Sunshine Ordinance are supposed to be summarized. So I'm going to comment on a number of two public comments, summaries on our comments last time. Under the City Librarian's report, item number 3, page 6, Peter Warfield, Executive Director, and so on and so forth. The last sentence says he said there were many items that were not discussed, including. And then I gave a description of important items that were not discussed. And I think those deserve to be properly represented or summarized, as if you like the wording. Removal of print notices, I don't think that makes it clear. A simple, including the discontinuation of print notices for patrons or for library users. The suicide. What suicide? I spoke about the suicide in the library and the library's actions with respect to follow-up. The Maya Angelou statue. Well, what about that? I spoke about the rejection of a proposed Maya Angelou statue by the Arts Commission and others. So I'd appreciate if you would clarify that portion so that it accurately represents a summary of what I spoke about. Under agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes, he said the points he had made were that the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California and the Freedom Foundation. I don't know if there is such a thing as the Freedom Foundation, but I spoke about a group that is in the city and that has for more than 10 years opposed RFID in the library, and I think that group should be spelled out correctly. And finally, I'm surprised there isn't any interruption of the adjournment item where Edna James spoke about everything but adjournment and was not interrupted by the chair for being off topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing that there is none, commissioners, we have the minutes of October 17th of 2019 before us.
I move to approve them as given.
We have a motion
I second.
to approve, and we have a second.
A second.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any further discussion on the minutes of this, of October 17th? No? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor to approve the minutes as they are in October 17th, 2019, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the minutes stand approved as they are. We are moving into our last item of this evening, which is the adjournment of this meeting. And we are doing so in the memory of Hiroshi Kashiwagi, a longtime SFPL librarian, poet, playwright, author, and symbol of wartime resistance. And we're going to turn it over to our city librarian to share more.
Thank you, President Wardell. I appreciate this opportunity to request the Library Commission's consideration of adjourning in memory of this talented librarian, and I appreciate this opportunity to pay tribute to Hiroshi Kashiwagi, a gifted librarian who served San Francisco Public Library for over 20 years. You have a copy of his obituary in your packets. Mr. Kashiwagi passed away in Berkeley on October 29th, just days before he was set to turn 97 years old. As noted in his obituary, he was a celebrated poet, playwright, author, actor, and symbol of wartime resistance. The San Francisco Public Library staff and patrons of the Western Addition Branch Library knew him as an extraordinary librarian. Mr. Kashiwagi earned his master's degree in library science from UC Berkeley and began his career at SFPL in 1966. He worked as a reference librarian in literature, Japanese language materials, government documents, and as a branch manager. During his career, he curated an extraordinary Japanese language collection at the Western Addition Branch Library before retiring in 1987. People from all over Northern California and the region visited the Western Addition Branch Library just to access those materials. He was recognized by the San Francisco Public Library Commission in 2010 with a plaque at the Western Addition Library recognizing his contributions. In recent years, he continued to stay engaged, attending programs and open house events at the Western Addition Branch Library, honoring us with his presence. I'm honored that I had the opportunity to meet him during my tenure. Mr. Kashiwagi will be missed by the entire SFPL community, and thank you for your consideration of adjourning the Library Commission meeting this evening in his memory.
Thank you. We'll have our final public comment.
Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. I appreciate the summary of the career of the person you want to adjourn in honor of, and certainly support that. Also appreciate the inclusion of biographical information which was provided with the library agenda packet and is in the back of the room. Earlier, during public comment on the first substantive item of the agenda, you heard from a very, very long-time library advocate who referenced somebody else, and I would like to propose that you add that person's name to this, or if necessary, a future adjournment in honor of, in memory of. I've said it before and I've said it again. I think that the library commissioners, each and every one of you, is remiss in your duty to represent the public and to do your job as policy setters for the library. I appreciate that there were very few of you this evening who expressed some interest and some response to public comment and issues raised by public comment. Every one of those questions that you asked were on topics that could and should have been specific agenda items so that you could have a fuller discussion and a fuller presentation on those items. I would certainly say that issues arising in the City Librarian's report, the budget priorities, a whole range of issues have come up this evening, any one of which, including those you have asked questions about, could and should be considered for separate entry as Library Commission agenda items. So I ask that you not adjourn without expressing a concern and a request that there be on every library agenda, as there used to be here, and as there are in most of the other organizations I've gone to meetings of, where at the end of the meeting you can speak up about what you think should be on future agenda items. And the public, of course, can comment. And there's no reason the public shouldn't comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Good evening, Commissioners. Andrea Grimes, Book Arts and Special Collections. I'd like just to wrap this up by commemorating Hiroshi Kashiwagi, who was a wonderful librarian. And I was privileged to have known him and his wife, Sadako, who is another fabulous librarian, children's librarian at the Presidio branch. Hiroshi was one of the really wonderful librarians in the literature department of the Old Main Library, who was instrumental in founding the Little Magazine collection. And in fact, some of his poetry may be found in a San Francisco Public Library little magazine called Affectionate Bear. That collection, founded with about 40 titles of local little magazines, has grown to over 4,000 items. And it was Hiroshi and other librarians like Dennis Manus and other people that I forget right now, but I inherited that collection, and it is one of the most foremost collections of little magazines and zines in the world. So we have Hiroshi to thank for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shelley Cocking, the Chief of Collections and Technical Services. I didn't happen to have a chance to work with Hiroshi. I did get to work with his wife, and I was a personal friend of both of theirs. And one thing I haven't heard mentioned in the description about him is that in his last 10 years of his life, he also decided to become an actor. And a lot of the films are being produced by a local film studio, and they aren't currently out on DVD, but we did reach out to them, and they were so tickled by the idea of having the DVDs in the collection and knew that Hiroshi would be interested in having them be part of our collection. They're working on producing the DVDs, and I'm hoping that we'll all be able to view them very soon. There's about 5 different films, so we'll look forward to that.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Hello, everyone. My name's Heidi Ward. I'm a senior at the University of San Francisco, and it is with the first ever McCarthy Fellowship in San Francisco program that I had the pleasure of working with the library this fall. And I just want to extend a thank you to not only Michael, but the whole commission, my friends at the Bridge at Maine. I don't think anyone is here right now, but that's okay. And just the library community more broadly. I think despite the fact that dissenting and disgruntled voices are often the loudest and most frequently heard from, we should all be extremely proud of this A-. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing that there is none, I would like to offer to the commission an opportunity to adjourn this meeting in the memory of Hiroshi Kashiwagi, longtime San Francisco Public Library librarian, poet, playwright, author, and symbol of wartime resistance. An actor. An actor. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, move, and we have a second. All those in favor to adjourn in the memory of his life, of this librarian, say aye. Aye. And all those opposed. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.